Have you ever noticed how loud gulls can be? If you've spent any amount of time near a coast, you've probably noticed that these birds are not only incredibly noisy, but also scream pretty much all of the time. And when you start to think about it, it's kind of strange that we haven't evolved to be able to tune out their cries. After all, we've been living alongside these birds for thousands of years in coastal communities. But there is a reason why we don't just tune them out, and why they seem to be especially noisy. And it all comes down to survival. See, most animals rely on at least one of their senses to warn them of danger. Sight is perhaps the most obvious sense animals use to detect predators or other threats. Hearing is also common, like when a bird uses its acute hearing to detect an approaching hawk. Some animals, like dogs, rely primarily on their sense of smell to keep them safe. But for gulls, their sense of hearing is not good enough to keep them safe from predators. Their eyes, however, are excellent for spotting danger. And so it makes sense that their auditory warning system would have evolved to supplement their vision, not replace it. In other words, if a gull sees a predator, it will scream to warn the rest of the flock. And because they're social creatures who rely on each other for not just food and safety, but also for raising their young, it's vital that this warning gets out quickly and efficiently. Evolution has favored gulls with particularly loud voices and keen eyesight in order to keep their whole group safe. Now, you might be thinking that this doesn't necessarily explain why they're screaming all the time. After all, there aren't exactly predators running rampant along most coastlines. Well, while it might seem like a gull is just randomly screaming at the top of its lungs every time you pass by, there's more to these seemingly random screams than meets the ear. For one thing, gulls are wild animals who do not really have any natural predators to fear, except for maybe us humans. But they still retain their instinct to scream at the sight of danger. And because they're such social animals, they might not even need to see the danger for themselves to feel threatened. If a gull sees another gull being attacked by a predator, for example, or even if it just hears another gull's alarm call, it may scream itself, even if it has no visual evidence of a threat. The gull is essentially saying, "Hey, I don't know what's going on, but this other bird is sure scared of something, so let me be scared too." This behavior is known as alarm calling, and it's a great example of how animals can use each other as sensory input to increase their own chances of survival. After all, each individual gull is far less likely to spot a lurking predator than the whole flock is, since there's safety in numbers. But by screaming and listening to each other, they can all stay informed of potential dangers, even if they can't see it for themselves. Now, this doesn't explain why they scream at people, though. Surely we're not scary to them. We're certainly not predatory. Well, yes, we might not be scary to individual gulls, especially if they've grown up around people like these guys have, but we are scary to their young. Baby gulls are particularly vulnerable to being snatched by predators. And to prevent this, parents will often try to distract a potential predator by screaming at it, giving their babies a chance to get away safely. In this case, humans might inadvertently trigger this response if we enter a nesting area, even if we have no intention of harming the chicks. In other words, if a gull sees you looking at its baby, it'll probably assume you're a threat and scream accordingly. Of course, there could be another reason why you're hearing so many gulls right now. Even if you're not standing directly next to a flock of birds, their noise can carry over long distances, especially if you're near a cliff or other reflective surface. Plus, when the sound bounces back, it can be hard to pinpoint where it's coming from, which means that you can end up hearing a lot of gulls without ever seeing one. So the next time you're hanging out by the coast and you hear a bunch of gulls screaming in the distance, just remember that those birds probably have excellent eyesight, and you should probably be more afraid of what's lurking below the water than what's up above. Thanks again to Brilliant for sponsoring this episode, and thank you for watching.